guest. I could probably spend the first 5 minutes just running through his list of accomplishments and jobs and all that, but we'll keep this quick. You know him as member of the national championship Michigan football team, captain of that team, all-pro lineman in the NFL, host of the In the Trenches podcast and some other Inside Michigan football stuff. And now, most recently, you can add radio host to that ever-growing resume, as he earlier this week has debuted as a co-host for 97.1's Drive Time show, Stoney and Jansen with Heather. It is Jon Jansen. Jon, thank you so much for joining us this week.
It's great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
So, like I said, grateful that you can fit me into your busy schedule. Can you kind of just talk me through your latest venture and kind of how things are going so far?
Things have been great, and I appreciate you not boring your listeners with a whole bunch of things that have happened in the past. I think the key is, at Michigan, we won the national championship. We are striving for a second within the span of hopefully our lifetimes. As much as we're hoping that in the span of a couple of lifetimes, maybe we'll get to see some Detroit Lions success. So. But I'm excited to be with you. I'm excited for the new job. I have subbed in at 97.1 The Ticket here in Detroit over the past 3 or 4 years. Worked with Stoney a little bit. Obviously, I work with Doug Karsh. He and I do the Game and Tailgate show. We've done that for, I think we're going on 6 years now. And this is going to be obviously a unique season in doing that. So it's been a lot of fun, and I love being on the radio. I love talking sports. More than Michigan football.
Yeah, good deal. No, there's a lot of boxes being checked there. I think I'm on board with all that. I think you might be getting a little carried away with the whole Detroit Lions having success in the next 100 years or so, but I can forgive you for that, especially since you did your time and spent some time on the Lions roster. So the new show, 6 a.m. Do you have any adjustments being a morning person? You kind of used to doing that?
I am. I've always been a morning person. When I was at Michigan, I'd meet Mike Gittleson early, see me and some of my line mates. When I was in the league, especially at the end of my career, spend a lot of time before meetings and before practice, early in the morning before guys got there, just trying to get the old bones moving again. And it's kind of carried over into my life after football. I'm not one that gets a lot of sleep, so I usually go to bed around, 10:30 or 11, so I can catch most of what happens in the evening, and then I'm usually up by 4:30 in the morning. So the new show fits my schedule extremely well, and it's also been it's fit well into where I'm at in my professional career. Obviously, it's a huge step forward. It's a great opportunity for me to be on the morning drive here in Detroit, but with all the responsibilities I have at Michigan, provides me some more time to be able to, accomplish that during business hours. And I've got 4 kids, and they all know that business hours, when you're talking about Michigan football for me, or you're talking about Detroit sports, it's a 24-hour deal. So they're on board with it as well.
That's fantastic. I've always wondered you mentioned you go to bed at 10:30, 11. I've always the morning drive people having to talk sports and having a lot of these things going on later and later, all these big events. That's always fascinating, but I guess sleep is kind of the first sort of casualty when it comes to that. So you're replacing, not a good word, but you're filling the spot of the late Jamie Samuelsen. Obviously, fantastic person. I had the privilege of kind of working with him when I was working for the Free Press. We kind of had some digital staples that he'd work with us on too. Obviously, incredible person. Very tragic with what's happened there. What's it sort of been like, sort of stepping into those shoes, or working in that slot now?
Well, it's, nobody's going to fill the shoes of Jamie Samuelsen. Nobody's going to step into his place. And it was, first of all, it's an honor to be on with Stoney to fill a role that, was left vacant by Jamie and his unfortunate passing. And we all know the story involved there. And the legacy that he leaves. And it's something that I'm very familiar with, not in regards to necessarily those circumstances, but when you play football at the University of Michigan, there is somebody that held that position before you. And there's a number of All-Americans that may have been at your position. There's a number of just great individuals, great football players. And then obviously playing with the Washington football team, when I was there, it was the Washington Redskins, and a great tradition and history of winning there, especially with the Hogs in Joe Gibbs' first tenure, having to fill or step into, some vacancies left by those guys. So I'm familiar. And the one thing that I do know is that, especially from the NFL and really every place that I've been, where you are at this point in time, the opportunities that you have, the ability to move forward has all been built on and by those who came before you. And I just am hoping to, carry the torch while it's my turn and hand it off to somebody in the future. And when I was at Michigan, obviously was able to hand it off, and there's been a lot of great offensive linemen, a lot of great number 77s. And the same at Washington, and now with what I'm doing on the radio side and through the media, it's important to know where things were 50 years ago, 30 years ago, 20 years ago, 1 year ago, and understand that I'm not here doing what I'm doing because it just happened, right? I've listened and learned from Jamie. I've listened and learned from Stoney. Listened and learned from Doug Karsh and Dan Deerdorf, who I have learned a tremendous amount from since he and I have been back in Ann Arbor, and him obviously doing the color and getting a chance to work alongside him. So it's more just appreciating the fact that there's great history every place that I've been, and trying to live up to those that have come before.
I think that's a really cool way of looking at things, for sure. So the jumping to the media side of things, is this something you sort of had in your sights? Obviously, when you're playing, I'm sure your focus is on there. But did you kind of know you wanted to go this route after your playing career? And what's it sort of been like, sort of honing a new craft after your Jon Jansen football player, that's still probably always going to be everyone's first impression of you, but sort of going to career number 2, what's it sort of been like continually working on that craft and forging another path for something you're known for?
Well, unfortunately, we've all learned the hard way, those of us that have been football players, some in other professions, is that you can't play football forever. I still think I can and wish I could. I'm still waiting for that phone to ring, but since in the meantime, I have, when I was playing, I had a TV show that I would do on Monday nights called Monday Night Live, and I enjoyed being able to talk sports, and it was kind of my introduction. We do interviews and we do a lot of things where you're always the one answering the question. So you can say whatever you want. It doesn't matter what the question is. And I think we're learning that now as we continue to learn from or hear from college coaches, football coaches, that no matter what the question is, they're going to answer however they want. And look at the debates, the presidential debate or the vice presidential debate, they're going to answer it however they want. So asking the questions, that became a big time challenge for me. And it sounds, and I know that you understand this, it sounds easy to do, but when you're trying to think of a follow-up question while still listening to, whoever you are interviewing, what they are saying, there's a big challenge because I would play this game in my head, and this would happen to me more at games, whether it was, interviewing a coach at halftime or post game or a player. I would ask a question and I would write it down. And before I would ask the question to the player, I would answer it myself like 4 or 5 different ways. And I would get to the point where I'd be like, that's a dumb question. And so I was paralyzed by trying to ask these questions and figure out what I was going to ask. And so that is a learned skill. And it's taken me a long time. Like I mentioned, I was involved in the media side of things when I was playing, at Michigan in the NFL, had a couple of shows. Then when I got done, it's been a long process. Like I worked for the Big Ten Network. I came back to Michigan. I've been doing that, worked for Sirius XM, and the entire time, the one thing that I've learned, especially when you're trying to find your way and trying to find or make a new career path for yourself, is that you can't pass up opportunities. I was one when I was playing. If coach asked me, hey, can you do this? Yes, I could do it. And then I'd figure out a way to get it done. It's the same thing in any profession. And now that I'm on the media side of things or on this side of the microphone, it's, hey, if they ask you if you can do something, the answer always is yes. And then before I actually have to do it, I've got to figure out, how that is, what that is, learn and practice at it and get better at it, because success is always something that we're after. I wanted success as a football player, as a team, as an individual. Now I want that same thing in my second profession or my next life. And that is, I want to be the best at what I do. So I've got to learn, listen back to old tapes and radio and find out what's successful, what's not, what's worked for me, what hasn't. And that's kind of what drives me now in this profession. Who knows what comes in a couple of more years. But I love being able to talk all sports, not just football, not just Michigan football. I have a passion for it. But obviously my sweet spot is there in Ann Arbor.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think like on the hiring side of things and even in the media, it's you see a lot of former athletes getting into analyst roles or things like that. And I always kind of thought, okay, you're gonna hire these people because they have that expertise. But I think that expertise is only kind of some of it. And everything you were talking about, like you could almost hear your competitive drive in there and like wanting to get better and not wanting to be complacent. And I think athletes really have that ingrained in them because of to play at the elite level that they did at athletes, they sort of have to have that drive. And I think you see more and more people betting on these athletes to sort of have that drive at the next level. And I think that's I see a ton of that with you. What about this transition in careers has kind of been the most enjoyable to you, or is that competitive drive kind of like, do you enjoy that process of it in itself?
I do. I love the competitive side of things. And it's always, I was with Sirius XM. I never had a permanent show. I would be on ESPNU, and Playbook was the name of the show. I was on that for a few months, and the Big Ten channel, I was on that for a while, and it was sporadic. And, it's for me, the competitive side of how do I get better? How do I do better than somebody else in regards to, how you present yourself. And that's so much of what this is made up of, and the work that has to go on behind the scenes. When you do an interview, make sure that, you're prepared for it. You've got, whether you have questions written down or they're in your head, you have to have something ready to go, because we've all interviewed a lot of athletes. Some of them are great at answering questions, and they'll expound upon topics, and they'll take it from one, where you originally started to somewhere else. And that leads you to a follow-up question. Others are more yes, no answers. And so trying to pry something out of them and get them to open up is something that I've enjoyed. And quite honestly, the one thing that I enjoy the most about what I'm doing right now, and it's kind of, there's two parts. When I'm at Michigan and with Michigan football, I get a chance to be around the student athletes on a daily basis under normal circumstances. And I love Michigan. I love Michigan football, and I enjoy talking to those kids and building relationships with them, watching them grow. Kind of the same as a lot of the coaches talk about when a kid comes in at 18, and I interview them. They're so much different when I interview them as juniors or seniors, and to watch their growth, not just on the field, but them as individuals. That's great. And just being able to stay in touch with what's going on at Michigan, and now in my new role at 97.1, what's going on inside of, Detroit sports or Michigan sports as a whole. I've had a chance to interview, Coach Izzo a number of times. I'd love to get a chance to talk to Mel Tucker, on the college side of things. And then obviously the pro sports, it just opens up an opportunity to build more relationships in the sports community here in Southeast Michigan.
For sure. So I kind of started the interview off kind of sort of mentioning this big long resume of things you've done, things you're doing. You stepping into this new role at 97.1, you're still keeping those Michigan roles, and I think you mentioned Big Ten Network, Sirius, those stuffs that kind of had to get pushed off to the side. But how important was it for you to continue getting to do the stuff at Michigan?
That would have been a deal breaker. That to me was something that I have a passion for, and I want to be a part of the University of Michigan. I want to be a part of the athletic department. I want to be a part of, in these times, finding a way to help the athletic department through this time. And it's a great team to be a part of, but also to be able to tell just the great stories that are, that make up Michigan athletics and Michigan football. And over the pandemic, I've had a chance to go back and talk to John Wangler, Jumbo Elliott, and just a number of Bubba Paris and just a number of former players that, they get a chance to be in the spotlight again. And we all understand at some point that, yes, the clock keeps ticking and more players come in and more players leave, and there's legacies that are made. But at some point, you kind of feel like, even though Michigan will always welcome you back and you're always a part of that, and the fans remember that you're just a little bit further back in their memory. So when I ask them, hey, do you want to come on the podcast? Do you want to, relive a 1980 Rose Bowl, or you want to talk about Bo or Mo, or, talk to Desmond Howard a couple of weeks ago about the catch. And all of them just absolutely love being able to relive some of those moments. And the fans love it as well because they remember it, but to hear it from them and it makes it real and it makes it live again.
Absolutely. So kind of just staying on course with Michigan, kind of focusing a little bit on this upcoming season. What are kind of what's your outlook on the season? You talked about how you kind of get to be around the team a bit, be around players. What have you kind of taken from this whole last couple of months of craziness of will they or won't they? Now that they're playing, you got to get ready there. What do you think the ceiling for this year's team is, and what's a realistic mindset a fan should have this year?
Well, so the ceiling is the same as the ceiling's always been, and that is, hey, they could win a championship. They could win a national championship. Realistically, is that going to happen in 2020? That obviously, that's why we play the game. And for Michigan, the talent that they have is it's good. It's really, I would say they have great talent, but it's unproven talent. When you replace 4 offensive linemen, that's a big deal. When you replace a quarterback, and you're replacing them with a quarterback that has had no meaningful reps, even if it's Joe Milton or it's Cade McNamara, it doesn't matter. It's a new cadence. It's a new voice in the huddle, talking to new players in the huddle. You lose a wide receiver like Nico Collins, who hasn't opted back in yet, and I don't necessarily expect that he will. at this point. But now all of a sudden it changes your wide receiver room, where you go from, having this 6'4", 6'5" body that's, can go up, and get that ball deep down in enemy territory, to a lot of guys that are like a Ronnie Bell or a Mike Sandristil or a Giles Jackson, that they don't have that height, but you add a whole lot of speed. So there's a lot of potential in this group offensively. And then defensively, my goodness, I think this is going to be a special group. Obviously, the headliners are Kwity Paye and Aiden Hutchinson up front on that defensive line. What excites me about this defensive line is that they can create some mismatches. One, just with those two guys, but then inside you got guys like Chris Hinton, Carlo Kemp, Donovan Jeter. There's a lot of talk in a guy that I'm excited to see in Julius Weiskopf. I just talked to Don Brown just a couple of days ago, and he came in at 260. He's about 290 right now, and Don couldn't talk enough about how he has grown, how he has developed, and he runs the same at 290 as he did at 260. And I'm excited about the front seven. Cam McGrone was just on the podcast that came out late this week, and I'm excited to see him and his development. When he was thrown in last year against Wisconsin due to the injury by Josh Ross, now all of a sudden you've got a kid in there that doesn't have a lot of experience, got a lot of talent, but we saw him grow throughout the year. Now he has film, and the coaches have film to look back on and say, okay, you did this well. We need to do this better. And how do we utilize the talents of a Cam McGrone that is sideline to sideline player, that loves when he gets to the point of attack, that he can deliver a blow and he gets there with some violence. So I'm really excited about this defense, and I think everybody's big question mark, as I think I've taken over and gone through the whole roster here, is without Ambry Thomas, who hasn't opted back in. And there's a number of reasons, first off, why guys have opted out. And I haven't talked to Ambry. I don't know necessarily why or why not he hasn't decided to come back. I do know last year in training camp, he missed most of training camp due to health reasons. So I got to believe that some of that is played into Ambry Thomas deciding that he's going to sit out this year during the pandemic. But Vincent Gray got some good experience last year. I like him, especially when we start off the season with the Minnesota. Rashad Bateman has opted back in. He's easily a top 15, 20 pick in next year's NFL draft. And Vincent Gray is a little bit of a taller, longer corner that I think matches up well against them. And so I'm excited about him. And then who fills in at that other corner role? Is it DJ Turner? Is it Gamon Green? Is it Jalen Perry? And maybe it's maybe the whole trio decides that they're going to be the ones that fill in, and they'll rotate in and out till somebody separates from the pack. So a lot of excitement about this defense, and I think it's going to be the strength of this team.
Don't apologize for going through the roster. Hearing you talk about football makes me want to run through a wall and fast forward a couple more weeks to get to the actual play.
How excited are you going to be come the 24th when we actually get the teeth off, even though it's on the road and even at home, right? We're not going to have a lot of fans, but just to know that Michigan football, Big Ten football is going to be on the field, it's a different level.
It's just the difference in mindsets and philosophies from now to 6-8 weeks ago is incredible. I want to quick circle back a little bit to you mentioned the offensive line lost 4 out of 5 people. Just how important is Jalen Mayfield's return to that offensive line? I figure if there's someone I'm going to talk to about right tackle play at Michigan, you might be a good person to ask about that.
Well, it's big for the offensive line, and I'll talk about that in just a minute, but it's huge for Jalen Mayfield. Last year, which was the only year that he started at Michigan, he grew throughout the year, and I talked about Cam McGrone and watching him get better. Jalen Mayfield did the same thing, and the more experience he got, the more reps he was able to get, he just continued to improve throughout the year to where when the season ended, you started to hear, Mel Kiper and some of these draft gurus talk about the draft of 2021 and that Jalen Mayfield could be a first-round pick. And all of those projections were based on what he had done, but also the projections of what they expected him to do on the field this year. When he opted out, I was concerned because there wasn't going to be that development. There wasn't going to be that opportunity to show how he's grown and using his hands, what he's been able to do with his footwork and just, being able to play with good pad level, all of the basics of offensive line play. You want to see those be consistent traits that you're going to draft in the first round. Now that he is back, he's going to be able to prove all of those things are correct. And yes, this is where he is if he's going to be a first round pick, and he definitely has that potential. So for him, I'm very excited that, Michigan's playing, the Big Ten's playing, and he has decided to come back. For Michigan's offensive line, it gives a player, at least one player up front that has game experience. And then you can spread out some of the other experience, like a Ryan Hayes, who last year had been for John Runyon for the first couple of games when he was hurt and got some looks throughout the season. Now you've got two tackles that have, some really good experience and some experience, but they're two athletic, long, tall, aggressive players. It also allows, Andrew Stuber, who was in that right tackle competition last year, to be able to bump down inside. I've talked to him a number of times. He is 100% recovered from that ACL injury. Now you've got a little bit of experience there as well. And so you've got, two guys on the right side that know each other extremely well, and Andrew Stuber and Jalen Mayfield. You've got a tackle on the other side. So you can start to see why, even though there's 4 new starters, you feel a little bit more confident going into the season, knowing that they're not devoid of experience. And then Andrew Vastardis, they haven't necessarily said he's the starter at center, but he's a fifth-year guy. He's a smart guy. When he's done playing football for Michigan, he's going to medical school. And again, it's not like you're asking a freshman or a redshirt freshman to go in there and play. He is a fifth-year senior. He's been able to, learn from those that have come before. Cesar Ruiz, the guy that was the center last year, was a first-round pick for the New Orleans Saints. And Scott, I don't know if you saw the game that New Orleans just had in Detroit, but Cesar Ruiz is playing extremely well. So I'm excited to see that. And
I was going to say, absolutely, between him and Big Mike in New England, I think you're seeing the Ed Werner guys really making an impact at the next level for sure.
You do, and then that obviously, Michael Onwenu was the guy that was the starter at left guard. I mean, sorry, he was at right guard, but Ben Bredesen was a starter at left guard, and there you've got some young talent in terms of whether it's Carson Barnhart or a Trent Jones or Cole Honigberg, or I know Zach Carpenter is going to be backing up, the center position, but those positions in the middle there are kind of interchangeable. And you go right down the list. A guy that I'm excited about to finally, that it seems like things just started to click during bowl practice, and that's Chuck Filiaga. A lot of hype coming into Michigan, and sometimes it just takes a few years. Sometimes it takes 1 year, sometimes it takes a couple of games. But when things click, you can see it in these guys. And going back to one of the questions you had asked before, why do I love doing what I'm doing? I think that Chuck Filiaga is a great example of, you see a kid come in, you see him, work hard the entire time, and all of a sudden, wow, they just get it. And you see them turn into these great players. And he's obviously got to go on the field and perform, but he's going to have that opportunity. So I'm excited about this offensive line. That's what Jalen Mayfield coming back does. It allows some of that talent to be spread out. And the other thing that I like, and this is something I think Ed Werner has done a great job of, and Jim Harbaugh and the whole offensive staff, is building a depth of talent on that offensive line. So when you have 4 guys that, go and play in the NFL, you're not left and the cupboard's not bare, that you can put guys in, and they may be inexperienced, but they're going to be really good football players. And this year, I think that, you asked about the realistic expectations. I think realistically, this offensive line, when you watch them play, at times you're going to say to yourself, wow, this is an old school Michigan offensive line. They are road grading. Nobody's touching the quarterback. This is great. You're also going to have moments, and hopefully it happens, when it doesn't cost Michigan, where you look at and you say, wow, this is a really young offensive line, and they just made a boneheaded mistake. Those things happen. Those happen to veteran players. But hopefully what we see is that these players don't make the same mistake twice. And with Ed Warner, one of the traits of his offensive lines is they may make a mistake, but when they come to the sideline, it gets corrected, they get taught, and then they go back on the field and they perform and they don't make the same mistake twice.
I think anyone that's watched Michigan the last couple of years and seen what sort of how Warner's kind of rebuilt that line and just the way they play, I think there's got to be a lot of a pretty good level of optimism with fans when it comes to the next men up stepping up and doing well there. And just on the Chuck Filiaga point, he's actually from my neck of the woods down here in Texas, and he's definitely someone I'm pulling forward to. His parents met both of them. They were at a U of M alumni club event last week, and his mom is one of the most hilarious parents I've ever met in my life. So
wonderful people, aren't they?
Definitely hoping to see him excel. I'll wrap up. I know you've been incredibly generous with your time, and I'm appreciative of that. So I'll wrap up with a couple quick questions. Players from your team that you stay in touch with. I'm always curious about that. People from the title team. I know there's always a big brotherhood and a bond built there. Who are some of the people from the guys you played with back in your time that you're still super close with?
You know what? It's a long list, and talked to Brian Griese quite a bit. Obviously called to congratulate him at the beginning of the year when he got the Monday night booth. That's obviously a booth that is it belongs with a Wolverine in there. Obviously, we saw Dan Dierdorf in there for a long time, so very excited for him and have been able to stay close with him. Mark Campbell. Jeremy Tooman, two guys that I came in as a tight end. The three of us came in together, obviously moved to the offensive line. Those guys, just like brother, really. And Mark is, I've said this before, I think on a couple of other times, he is the oldest friend that I have. He went to a private school, Bishop Foley in Madison Heights. I went to, a public school, Clawson High School. But we grew up about 1.5 blocks from each other. So I remember him as early as like 4 or 5 years old and, getting in trouble and doing things that boys do. And to be able to have the experience of playing, and it was kind of like Michigan Notre Dame rivalry where I went to, Clawson and he went to Madison Heights. They had the gold helmets and the whole deal. So we played against each other every year in high school and not just in football, but in basketball as well. So, great friends there. Sam Swart on defense, Glenn Steele, Rob Sweat, Josh Williams, Rob Renas. Get a chance to talk to all those guys, and I'm really fortunate in my position at Michigan when it's not just the podcast, it's not just talking about Michigan football or Michigan athletics. I also am the guy that the former football players call. We want to come back and get a chance to see a practice, or they want to come back and get a tour and see, what Schembecker Hall looks like now and Glick Fieldhouse room. So I'm very fortunate that they get or that I have the chance and the opportunity to talk to these guys quite a bit. So the relationships that I have with that 97 team and, with so many that came through during my time there. Jared Irons, who now lives in Detroit and Chicago for a while, did him quite a bit. Joaquin Fazell, who's I believe is now an attorney down in Atlanta. I believe it's works from as well, or at least he's from Georgia. So I am very fortunate and blessed to be able to talk to these guys on a weekly, if not daily basis.
That's I'm sure another perk of the new career bend for sure, but that's very cool. Final question, certainly the most important one, not discounting anything else, but Michigan State later this year. You now have a coworker in Mike Valenti. Are there ways that Michigan fans can help give you pieces of trash talk to give to him when Michigan undoubtedly beats Michigan State by 5 touchdowns this fall?
Well, I want all of those Michigan fans to call in between the hours of 6 and 10 so we can celebrate. But if they could be a pain in his ass and call in between the hours of 2 and 6 in the afternoon, I think that would be tremendous.
Sounds good, John. Again, really appreciate your time, your generosity. Everyone listening, please give John's show a listen. 6 to 10 Monday through Friday. He's in the Trenches podcast and all of his other Michigan stuff. That's all I got for you, John. Really appreciate your time.
Hey, thanks, Scott. I really appreciate you having me on as a guest, and to all your listeners and to you as well. Go Blue.
Go Blue. All right.